What is going on, chess YouTube? In today's video, Magnus Carlsen is going to completely obliterate the super grandmaster Amin Tabatabai, I hope I said his name right, using the Jobava London System. This game was brutal, and it ends with an unbelievable checkmate in one move that Magnus Carlsen's opponent missed. You don't want to miss this video. Let's dive right in. All right, in the game, Magnus opens 1d4, and Amin Tabatabai goes knight to f6. And then here, instead of c4 or knight f3, Magnus goes knight to c3, indicating he's likely heading for a Verisov or a Jobava London. Now black goes d5. Obviously, white was threatening to move e4. Therefore, d5 clamps down on that e4 square. And now, sure enough, bishop to f4 is the move for the GOAT Magnus Carlsen. And now we have the Jobava London on the board with knight c3, d4, and bishop f4. Of course, here the idea, white is threatening knight to b5, piling up pressure on that pawn on c7. And how is black going to respond? Well, here black has a million different options. All of these are playable ideas. In the game here, black does go a6, immediately clamping down on that b5 square and stopping knight to b5 ideas. Certainly a playable idea from black's perspective. Now white continues e3, a very typical move in this line for white. Black goes e6, opening up the scope for his dark squared bishop, and ideas like bishop b4 and c5 are part of the idea of e6 being played here for black. Now here white, he plays the strongest move in the position, that is just g4, immediately going for the attack on the Kingside. Magnus Carlsen, he is out for blood in this game. He wants to blow black off the board. Now here, the strongest move for black is bishop b4, immediately pinning that knight on c3 to the king on e1. That is the right way to get counterplay. Now, instead of that, b5 played in the game, and this move does make some sense. After all, white is attacking on the queen side. Therefore, you immediately get your counterattack going on the queen side with the move b5. But here, Magnus, he's not slowing down. He goes g5, driving back that knight on f6. The knight has to go away. Knight fd7 chosen in the game. And now here, Magnus h4. He is intending h5 and then either h6 or g6, piling up those pawns on the king side. Now, what is black going to do? He gets counterplay going ASAP, as discussed. He goes c5, putting pressure on that weak pawn on d4. Now white goes knight f3, developing his own knight, bolstering d4, and now black goes knight to c6, continuing to develop and continuing to pile on the pressure on Magnus. But of course, Magnus is not done. He continues h5 on the king side. Before developing any of his pieces, he is just launching those pawns down the board, threatening g6 or h6, depending on his mood and what black does here. All right, here Amin continues bishop b7, developing his queen side. Magnus goes bishop g2, both sides with their bishops on this long diagonal here. Now Amin, rook to c8, developing his rook on the queen side, and now black is ready for either c takes d4 or b4 ideas, again trying to get some counterplay on that side of the board. Now here, Magnus, anticipating the move b4 from black, he just goes knight to e2, a move very typical in the French defense, getting away from that b pawn and getting ready for c3, which would bolster the pawn on d4. Now black goes bishop e7, and sure enough here, Magnus Carlsen, c3 is the move, bolstering d4, getting that famous pawn triangle in the middle of the board. Now here, sure enough, Amin, he goes b4, trying to attack the base of the pawn chain on c3, threatening b takes c3, and threatening to open up files on the queen side, of course, with white's king not really being safe on the king side or the queen side. Opening up files on this side of the board would certainly be to black's benefit. Now here, it turns out, according to the engine, the best way to continue the attack is just h6, trying to soften up that g7 square. And no matter what black does, if he goes g takes h6 or g6, either way, it is to white's benefit. Now, instead of that here, Magnus makes a move that really shocked me personally. He goes short castles, castling his king to the king side, where his pawns are already on the g5 and the h5 squares. What is Magnus Carlsen doing? Doesn't he know his king is not going to be safe on the king side? Well, to be honest, the king wasn't really that safe in the center of the board, and it wouldn't be safe on the queen side either. So no matter where you put that king, it's going to be in trouble anyway. So it's hard to criticize this move that much. All right, black continues a5, bolstering his pawn on b4. Now, knight g3 is the idea for Magnus. Again, he's piling up all of his pieces over there on the king side where he wants to attack. Now here, Amin Tabatabai, he does castle short. Short castles is the move, getting his king to the side of the board where Magnus wants to attack. I mean, Magnus must be just foaming at the mouth seeing this move. Short castles play right here. All right, now Magnus, rook c1, sliding his rook over to the soon-to-be open c-file. Black goes bishop a6, pressuring the rook on the e1 square. Of course, the rook is going to have to move. In the game, rook to e1 shows and sliding it over to the open file where white may be intending e4 next, and the rook will be very well placed on that square in that situation. Now here, black makes yet another slightly dubious move, queen to b6. Now the problem with this move, the queen needed to stay closer to the defense of the king side. It was a little bit better on d8, where the queen and the bishop were pressuring g5. Now on b6, if white gets the attack going on the king side, it is going to be so far away from the defense of the king side, that is going to be a massive problem. And here, Magnus, he does find the key attacking idea. And no, it is not g6 in the spirit of many lines, including the English attack in the Sicilian defense. No, it is the move instead, h6, trying to soften up that g7 pawn in the spirit of the Alpha Zero computer engine. Now here, no matter what black does, the king side is going to be weakened considerably. Now in the game, g6 was chosen by Amin Tabatabai. That is the stronger response. Instead, if you take on h6, then after g takes h6, the g file is opened up, and that is certainly to Magnus Carlsen's benefit. Instead, g6 played in the game, and it may look like the king side is very closed for now, and you are correct. It is relatively closed for right now. However, that g7 pawn is permanently weakened, and white may have some attacking ideas against that square later in the game. Now here, Magnus makes full use of the placement of the rook on the e1 square, and he finally breaks in the center of the board. e4 is the move. And now look at this. The center of the board is opening up. Magnus has a good space advantage in the center and on the king side, and these pawns on the king side, despite being so far advanced in front of the white king, they're actually very, very secure, and it's almost impossible for Amin to attack them. And all of this gives Magnus a massive strategic advantage so far in this game. All right, now here, the key move for black, according to the engine, is bishop c4, piling up pressure on the pawn on a2. Instead, rook f to e8 played in the game, and this move turns out to be a little bit passive. Now here, white takes on d5, e takes d5, then we have e takes d5, and then bishop to h3, the bishop being very active on this diagonal. We have the x-ray attack on the rook on c8, the pin on the knight on d7, and overall, the bishop wasn't doing that much on this diagonal, so bishop h3 makes a lot of sense from the goat. Now here, black goes rook c d8, sliding the rook over and supporting that weakened knight on d7. And now here, it turns out white has an absolutely beautiful tactical shot that'll just knock your socks off. If you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to find the beautiful idea for white right here in this position. And while you're at it, go and smash that YouTube like button for more videos just like this one. All right, here, the key idea for white, it is bishop takes d7. Here's the idea. After you give up the bishop for the knight, then after rook takes d7, then you go d takes c5. And it turns out with the c file opening up, all of the tactics work out in white's favor. Now, first of all, if you take the pawn with the bishop, you lose the rook on e8 immediately. Instead, if you take with the queen, then c takes b4 is simply deadly. I mean, the queen is under attack, and if you take the pawn with the queen, you lose the rook on c6. And again, the bishop is still pinned to the rook on e8. I mean, black is just completely busted in this scenario. So overall, in this position right here, bishop takes d7 was the key tactical idea, and I'm a little bit surprised the GOAT didn't find that in the game. Instead, c takes b4 was chosen, a decent move. Black takes back with the c pawn, c takes b4, and then we have queen to b3. The queen sliding over, pressuring d5. I mean, it's a decent square for the queen, and overall, Magnus is playing excellent. His rooks on c1 and e1 are connected. His pieces on the king side are slicing down the board, and overall, black, I mean, I can't draw arrows correctly. Wow, I can't draw arrows correctly. And overall, black is just very, very passive in this position. All right, Amin Tabatabai, he continues, bishop c4, pressuring the queen on b3. And now it turns out, according to the engine, you can actually play the exchange sacrifice, rook takes c4, giving up the rook for the bishop and the pawn on d5 after rook takes, d takes, and then queen takes c4. Instead, in the game, queen to e3 was chosen, sliding over with the queen, and And now again, that bishop on e7 is technically pinned to the rook on e8. If you move the bishop, I don't know. I mean, it really can't go anywhere. Let's say you go bishop f8, then simply queen takes, rook takes is tremendous for white, and that bishop on f8 would be pinned and very vulnerable. Instead, knight to f8 chosen in the game by Amin, and now here Magnus b3 drives back that bishop on c4. Now we have bishop b5, the bishop retreats, and now here Magnus queen d2, sliding back his queen and getting out of the way of any potential discovered attacks of the bishop on e7 if it were to move. Again, the queen would be vulnerable. Now we have a4, gaining space on the queen side, rook to e3, the rook lift on the third rank. Now we have a takes, and then here, according to the engine, the best move for Amin is rook to a8, finally trying to get some counterplay on the open a file. And of course, white would have a very hard time challenging that rook, as if white went rook to a1 himself, he would lose the rook on the a1 square, as no other piece does guard that square. Instead, in the game, knight to a5 chosen by Amin, and this turns out to be a very significant mistake, maybe even a downright blunder. And again, if you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to find the key idea for Magnus right here. And it turns out the key move is simply bishop c7. You fork the rook on d8, the queen on b6, and you win the game on the spot. Here, bang, bishop c7. I mean, you pretty much win the exchange on the spot, and that should be enough to win the game. Instead, though, in the game, rook c to e1, Magnus opting not to go bishop c7. He is just playing with his food, piling up pressure on the e-file. He wants to win some other way, apparently. All right, black, bishop d6, challenging the white bishop on the f4 square. Now we have knight e5, the knight jumps up, knight e6, black tries to block the e-file. Then we have some trades. Bishop takes, then rook takes, and then queen d1. The queen sliding back, maybe intending queen g4 or f3, something like that. I'll have to wait and see. Now black, rook d to e8, doubling up rooks on the e-file. And I do want to point out, so far, both sides are in a little bit of time pressure. Black having 35 seconds left on the clock versus just the 43 seconds of Magnus Carlsen. Now Magnus, queen to f3, the queen slides up, and then here black, he makes a critical mistake. It turns out that knight on a5 is very, very dim. You must get it off the rim, and you must go knight c6. Instead, in the game, queen takes d4 chosen, winning the free pawn. Now, what could be more obvious than winning a free pawn in the game of chess? Well, it turns out things are not so simple in this position. Here, Magnus goes rook d1, sliding the rook over and pressuring that queen on d4. Where is the queen going to go? It goes back to the a7 square, queen to a7, but then knight g4, the knight threatening to jump into the f6 square. And if you get knight f6 in, again, you can't take the knight, as then you lose the rook on e8 potentially. All right, black goes bishop e7, trying to guard that f6 square. Then we have queen takes d5. White wins back the pawn he lost earlier, but now look at the difference in terms of the quality of the pieces. The bishop on b5 and the knight on a5 are virtually useless in this position. White's queen is better centralized, and white's minor pieces on the king side are all clamping down. And don't forget the alpha 0 h-pawn on h6, which is acting like a fighting piece in this game. If Magnus gets the queen on, say, d4, e5, he will be threatening checkmate in one move on g7. All right, black continues, bishop c6, trying to get his queen side pieces back into the game, and it's a decent move, but now c6 is occupied by the bishop, and that means the knight on a5 is going to have an even harder time getting back into the game. All right, white continues, queen d2, dropping back with the queen. Then we have rook takes e3, bishop takes e3. The bishop is targeting the queen on a7. The queen slides over, queen c7 played in the game, and now queen d4. The queen jumps up and threatens checkmate in one move. The audacity of Magnus Carlsen. And now I do want to point out, in this position, Amin Tabatabai, he has 2 seconds left on the clock versus the 6 seconds left of Magnus Carlsen. And for that reason here, he makes a blunder. He goes rook d8, challenging the white queen on d4. And now you don't have to be a very stable chess genius to find the right follow-up for Magnus in this position. I mean, if you like puzzles and you're a beginner, pause the video. It's not much of a puzzle because Magnus delivers a checkmate in one move, queen g7, and he checkmates the black king on g7. As simple as that. There's simply no defense to queen g7 on move 39. Again, I'm going to cut Amin Tabatabai some slack. He had 2 seconds left on the clock. He's obviously playing a lot better than I would in that scenario, but anyway, very spectacular finish to this game. The Alpha Zero H-Pawn helps deliver the checkmate on G7. That is the strength of the Alpha Zero attack in virtually any chess game these days. It seems like that is the only thing white players do anymore, is attack with the H-Pawn all the way to H6 and then find some way to make use of it. So wow, what a game between Magnus Carlsen, the GOAT, and Amin Tabatabai from the 2025 Title Tuesday chess tournament that happened, let's see, yesterday, essentially. So very impressive stuff. Comment down below in terms of what you thought of this game right here. This is a very fun game in my opinion. So comment down below. And if you want to see more Title Tuesday action, check out this video right here where Magnus Carlsen plays the Ben Feingold counterattack F6 on move 1. I have never seen Magnus Carlsen do that. He did it in this week's Title Tuesday tournament. That game was a shocker. So check that video out again for Magnus playing 1 F6 as black out of the opening. And I'll see you in the next video.